Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the IHI single stage call rules and procedures. My name is Nassima, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And before we start, I just want to give you some information. So firstly, we are recording this session, and we will be publishing it on the IHI website and the B2Match platform. We will also be publishing the presentation slides. The call will be officially launched next week, and all the links and details of how to apply will be published on the IHI website and the Funding and Funders portal. Another important point, if you have any question, you are welcome to send them via the chat box, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Today, I have in the room my two colleagues, Bolivios, the Scientific Operation Coordinator, and we also have Desmond, who is the Legal Officer, and they will be presenting the slides to you. So now I will hand over to my colleague, Bolivios.
Thank you, Nassima. Thank you for the introduction. As Nassima said, my name is Polivios Hachiyango. I'm the Scientific Operations Coordinator in IHI, and together with Desmond, we will present you the call 7, the single stage call that will be published next week, which in principle on the 16th of January. During our presentation, we will provide some info about the rules with regards to participation, funding rules, and intellectual property. We'll give you some details about the process from call to grant award. A little bit more information about the call timeline, so to keep in mind while preparing your proposal, and also some points to remember that will be very crucial during the application process. Regarding the call 7, which is an open call, it's where applicants should submit a full proposal of 50 pages. It's very important to understand the structure of the single stage, especially for the ones that you're really new to Horizon Europe, but also to IHI. IHI Joint Undertaking is a public-private partnership, so we are expecting in the proposals to see a full cover of the value chain of the healthcare sector in order to meet the objectives of the call topics. More specifically, here we're expecting to see the public and the private actors to work together in order to prepare their proposal and compete for funding. The proposals submitted for each topic, they will compete to each other based on the funding available on the topic, and the highly ranked ones, they will be proceeded to the grant agreement preparation phase. And what we mean about the public and private actors, we refer mostly to academia, SMH, large companies, regulators, etc. So during this process, which is a bottom-up approach, the applicant consortium will be assessed based on the expertise in order to reach the objectives of the call topics. Of course, as I mentioned before, we expect to see participants from the different health sectors, so to meet these specific objectives. Here we introduce these slides in order to explain you how the single stage process works. IHI is a pen holder of the topic text, but at the same time, while we're developing the topic, we ask input from a wider research community and from our members, our contributing partners. The draft topic text, which is drafted by IHI office, goes through the consultation process with our different advisory bodies, the Science Innovation Panel, the State Representative Group, and the final topic text is adopted by the IHI Governing Board and is published in the work program. As Nassima mentioned before, The call will be also published not only in our website, but also in the Fundings and Tender portal, which is the official channel for the coordinator to prepare and submit the proposal to IHI. As soon as we launch the call, and after the submission deadline, the proposals will go through the evaluation process by dependent experts. IHI is not evaluating the proposals. IHI is appointing independent evaluators in order to assess the full package of the proposal. During this process, the full consortium, the public and the private partners, but also the contributing partners, will go through the evaluation process. This is an online process, nothing is on paper. We expect to see the proposal of 50 pages, no more, of course, because these pages above the 50 will not be assessed by the experts. Depending, like I mentioned in the previous slide, based on the available budget, the highest ranked proposals will be proposed for funding. After the evaluation process is over, we, as IHI office, will communicate the evaluation results to the applicants, and the selected proposals will go through the grant agreement preparation, and hopefully you will sign through your coordinator the grant agreement with IHI. The project partners, of course, will conclude also a consortium agreement prior to the grant agreement signature. Apologies. Now it's important to give some important highlights while preparing your proposal, so to take into consideration. The first element is to be aware of the general annexes of the Horizon Europe or Program 2023-2024 apply mutatis mutandis in the Call 7. Regarding the budget, in each topic, the maximum joint undertaking contribution is set in the core text, and it's important to take it into consideration while preparing your budget. Of course, the budget should be justified in not only the budget table, but also to take into consideration the related tasks. One specificity for IHI joint undertaking is the 45% eligibility criterion. Means that for the actions eligible costs and costs for the additional activities should reach the 45% of the total contribution. Of course, this 45% cannot come from anyone in terms of the participation, should come from members of the IHI, their constituent or affiliate entities, and or from the contributing partners. My colleague Desmond will touch upon this element a little bit later, but also we'll have a financial webinar that is taking place, I think, this week, next Friday, maybe. We'll give you more information about this, and please you can also participate to this webinar. For Call 7, the non-EU ICOP is capped to the 20%. So proposal that exceeds such threshold can be funded, but during the grant agreement preparation phase, you really need to reach the 20%. The reduction does not affect, of course, the fulfillment of the 45% criteria. Once again, for the single stage call, the page limit for the research and innovation action that IHI topic texts are established within is 50 pages. Applicants envisaging including clinical studies, you must provide details about the clinical studies in the dedicated annex, and this annex is also provided in the submission environment. For public bodies, research organizations, and higher education institutions from EU member states and associate countries, you need to have and gender equality plan or equivalent strategy. Please note that even though there's a self-declaration in Part A for the concerned entities, this should be verified during the grant agreement preparation process, and this is an eligibility criterion. Of course, the proposal should include a plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities. This is a requirement and it's also an eligibility criterion. Now we will introduce one really important condition that applies for all topics in Call 7, and more information can be found in the Work Program 2024 that is published already in our website. And these conditions applies to the affordability, availability, and accessibility of results. This was so-called 3A. Products and services they develop based or partially based on the results of clinical studies should be affordable, available, and accessible to the public at fair and reasonable conditions. How these could be described in the proposal Part B, in the plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities, you, the applicants, must identify potential and expected project results that may be subject to the 3A conditions, and you need to broadly outline your strategy to achieve the above objectives. In the evaluations, during the evaluation process, the proposal will be ranked in a singles list, and the proposals have the threshold being invited in order to prepare the grant agreements with the limits available on the budget. And I think now, Desmond, you can take the floor for the entities eligible to participate.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Polybius, for that introduction. So now we're going to discuss some issues in relation to eligibility. So in IHI, for the purposes of the program, we basically divide this into two tranches. One is the eligibility to participate in the first place, and the second is the eligibility to receive funding, because they are distinct under the actual program. So our first slide here, which is in relation to the very, very basics, the basic statement that we have here in yellow. In terms of participating in IHI actions, essentially everyone is welcome. So as you can see here, any legal entity, regardless of its place of establishment, which is carrying out work relevant to the call objectives, may be part of the applicant consortia. Now, what that essentially means is, as I said, everyone's welcome. There are various ways and methods by which someone can participate in the actual project in terms of the roles that they actually take and the class of participant that they take, but the general rule stands. And then, as you can see underneath, we actually have in green, we basically put in the qualifier, of course, and I'll come to this in a couple of slides, where we basically say, you know, even while everyone is welcome and everyone is eligible to participate, not everyone is eligible for funding. So to concentrate on eligibility for the moment, there's two really key issues in relation to eligibility. The first one is we need to ensure that the consortium itself is eligible, and we'll talk about that first. And then the second point is maybe some additional information on the eligibility issues for the individual participants themselves. So for a consortium as a whole, to be eligible under an IHI project, as we have here in the bullet points, we need basically a minimum of 3 entities. And one of those entities has to be an independent legal entity established in an EU member state. And then we need at least 2 more. And these 2 can either be established in a different member state or an associated country. And to draw your attention to the first bullet point, and it's mentioned in the second bullet point as well, when we talk about legal entities, what we talk about is those legal entities that are essentially not under the control of one of the other legal entities. So I think a good example here is you could not essentially have a large corporate entity with different affiliated members trying to fill all 3 slots. So that's what we mean by independent legal entity, and this is laid down quite clearly in the Horizon Europe regulation. So bear in mind, for an actual consortium itself to be eligible in terms of numbers, that's your main information there. 1 independent entity in a member state, and then 2 others in a different member state or an associated country. Then just some relevant information for the participants themselves and whether they're okay to participate. So as we said, EU countries and member states are fine. Overseas territories are actually fine. Those countries that are not associated to Horizon Europe are eligible to participate, but there is an issue in relation to whether they can receive funding. Those countries that are associated can. Those countries which are associated cannot. And also what we call LMICs, low and middle income countries, are also able to receive funding, and we'll talk about that a little later on. We're drawing our attention here on the right-hand side to just some bullet points because it's relevant and it's in the news, and we inevitably get questions on it. So in terms of countries associated to Horizon Europe, I think it's clear, if there's an official association agreement in place between the EU and that particular country, then obviously that makes them an associated country. There can be transitional arrangements, such as we had recently between the EU and the UK. And those of you who were involved in previous IHI calls will be aware of these transitional arrangements that were put in place. But coming to the next bullet point, we now confirm that going forward for the purposes of this call, the UK is treated as an associated country fully. So that basically means that the UK legal entities are able to participate, welcome to participate, and eligible to participate in IHI calls, and B, also they're also eligible for funding. By contrast, Switzerland, who was involved in IMI2, Switzerland has chosen not to associate with the Horizon Europe program at this time. Therefore, we're regarding them as a third country. So Swiss entities, while again eligible to participate, and indeed participate in many IHI projects and are very welcome, they are not eligible for funding, and we'll come on to that in the next slide. Just some bullet points here to draw people's attention to in relation to the eligibility criteria that we were discussing. So we have 2 quite pertinent cases here that I want to draw your attention to. Obviously, because of the ongoing conflict in regards to the Ukraine and the involvement of Russia and Belarus, we have a bullet point here that says legal entities established in Russia, Belarus, or in the non-government controlled territories of the Ukraine, that's primarily the eastern territories. They are not eligible to participate in IHI calls in any capacity. This is not an IHI specific condition. This is more a condition that applies to the wider Horizon Europe program. And then secondly, quite different but also relevant, is the situation in relation to Hungary, where basically if you look at the second bullet point there, it basically says that no European funds, and that means IHI funds, can be made available directly or indirectly to third parties in IHI projects that are public interest trusts. So for the consortium, I think what I would do is just flag this and say, look, if you actually have a legal entity originating from Hungary, it may or may not be affected. We would direct you to this slide. If you have further questions, contact IHI, but the first point you should look at is, if they're Hungarian, are they involved, are they connected or controlled by a public trust? If so, then this restriction may well apply. But we've also identified a link there, and this can be easily found online, where there is a good list of those affected entities. Then to come back to my earlier points in relation to eligible for funding. So because this is what we call a single stage call, IHI is extremely flexible in relation to the funding and who we can actually fund. So in terms of those entities that are applicable, essentially, if you are a legal entity established in a member state, an associated country, or the LMICs that we were talking about a moment ago, you are eligible for funding. So again, just to reiterate, you'll recall I was talking about a contrast between, for instance, the UK and Switzerland. Because UK are now an associated country for the purposes of this call and going forward, they will be eligible both to participate and to receive funding. However, Switzerland, and this is why we have the big red X on the second point, we're still considered as a third country because they have not associated, so they are eligible to participate and welcome to participate, but they may not receive funding from IHI. Now, We are also aware, and we have seen this in practice, the Swiss government does have quite an excellent mechanism for this, whereby Swiss entities participating in IHI calls may apply to the Swiss government and receive funding from the Swiss government, and it's quite an advanced process, and we're confident that Swiss entities becoming involved in IHI projects can receive funding that way. Lastly, there is a provision for legal entities that are coming from these third countries, whereby in really exceptional circumstances, where they are bringing something really unique to the actual project, where their participation is considered absolutely essential to the project, IHI may consider extending exceptional funding to those entities from third countries, but that's on a case-by-case basis. It needs assessment, and it should not be presumed by either a consortium or a third country applicant that they will be able to avail of this. And then in terms of just to develop on the point I just mentioned, so in terms of those who can receive funding, as you can see from the 2 checkpoints, both non-profit organizations, academics, hospitals, research organizations, and larger entities such as companies, not just SMEs, but medium and large size enterprises can also receive funding as well. This is an opportunity to organically develop a consortium which brings in all of these types of entities. They can all receive funding and they can all contribute to the proposal. We'll now move on to funding rules. So I mentioned right at the very start, we basically said that there was a couple of different ways to participate in the actual projects. And indeed, there's also a couple of different entities that we have joining IHI projects. So when we talk throughout this slide deck, and also I think Gail will mention this in her financial webinar Friday, and I think you'll hear, if you attend the individual topic webinars, you'll hear these terms used as well. IHI basically is a partnership, as Plivius referenced, between the private members who are COSIR, Europa, MedTech, and FPO. You know, we call these the private members. They themselves are the representative bodies, but usually in IHI projects, not exclusively, but usually, it's not the 4 private members who are taking part in the actual project. It's actually what we call their constituent and affiliated entities. So if I may just use by way of an example for COSIR, which is the representative body, you'll find that they have constituent entities and affiliated entities, and they will be the companies or the legal entities that make up COSIR, that COSIR as the representative body takes responsibility for. So if indeed we have a company which is a member of COSIR, then usually in an IHI project, it will be the company that appears as a beneficiary or as a participant in the actual project. And if you are a constituent or affiliated entity, then you are contributing in kind. You have the option to contribute in kind, and you are one of the only 2 entities that are able to contribute in kind towards IHI projects. Those entities that are, from a public background usually do not. And then the second type of entity that we have that we're going to talk about here is the contributing partner. Now, the contributing partners are quite a special case. Contributing partners are, by definition, they are not constituent or affiliated entities of the 4 private members. So they cannot be a member of COSIR, they cannot be a member of Europa Bio or MedTech or FPA. They range dramatically in size from, SMEs who are not, as I said, not connected with one of the representative bodies, but want to contribute in kind or financial contributions to IHI projects. They go from that size right up to the very large funding foundations and philanthropic organizations, such as the Gates Foundation, the Simon Foundation, Michael J. Fox Foundation. All of these have been engaged with IHI or IMI2 projects in the past. So it's a very wide gamut. And the reason why contributing partners are so central to what we do at IHI, and the reason why we're mentioning them here, is because in single stage calls, contributing partners can be a very important contributor of the in-kind and financial contribution that Plivius talked about, whereby the program is supposed to bring for at least 45, but we recommend 50% in kind to the actual project itself. So here in IHI, we have a legal team, and we look after this. Carolina, who's our contributing partner specialist, basically reviews all applications, and we'll deal with that in a bit more detail. So before you actually elect to become a CP, We'll just cover some quick points here. So as I said in the previous slide, we need to make sure, if you're going to become a contributing partner, that a CP is not affiliated directly via a regional or local organization to the IHIJU private members. That can actually be an issue. Sometimes it's tough to actually identify. So if you want to become a contributing partner in an IHI project, what we would do is we'd recommend that you just reach out to your various representative bodies, because it could be a case that you are a member of a national representative body who is then, affiliated to COSI or FP or one of the main representative bodies. So you'll need to make sure of your status. Secondly, just visit the IHI website and just familiarize yourself with the CP rules and with the CP guide. That's totally fine. Then we just want to make sure that your in-kind contribution is eligible. So we've put some language in here. What we would do is we talk about Article 6 of the grant agreement, but that's a lot of detail right for the purposes of the slide. So what I would just say is go to the IHI website, take a look at the contributing partner section, and familiarize yourself with the guide there and the template letters and the general points, and then you can reach out to us if you have any further questions. But the key point is we just need to ensure that the contributing partner contributions that may support consortia in the single stage call are what we call valid, and how we and eligible, and how we decide whether they're eligible or not is we basically ask, is the in-kind contribution eligible in accordance with this particular section of the grant agreement, which is Article 6. So we just need to make sure that the costs are actually recorded in the accounting system and they're identifiable and verifiable. And then when we talk about the contribution types, we've mentioned before, we have these different types of contributions that the contributing partners can actually make, or again, those constituent or affiliated entities of the private members can actually make. So there's basically three types. Two are in-kind and one is financial, and you can see them here. We have the ECOP, which is basically just in-kind contributions to operational activities. Then we have financial contributions, which we can basically say is cash, and that's very, very useful for some of the actual participants in the project. And then what we call EKAA, which is in-kind contributions to additional activities. Now, we're not going to go into detail on this now. What I would simply say is, I said, our colleague Gail is doing the financial webinar this week. She's going to really go into a lot of detail on this, explain the differences, and actually demonstrate how they are reflected in the proposal which is going to be submitted, and how they're actually reflected in the budget and that kind of thing. So if you're thinking about either, being a contributing partner and you want more information on this kind of stuff, or you're a potential coordinator and you want to understand how it works, I would very much recommend that you make sure that you attend Gail's webinar as well. Just for the purposes of this slide, the one thing I would point out is, as you can see on the right hand side, we have green arrows everywhere, because obviously the constituent and affiliated entities contribute all of the in-kind and financial contributions, but contributing partners do not contribute what we call EKAA, which is the additional activities, and Gail will talk about that at the webinar. Next one. Flavius made reference to the minimum requirement of 45% eligibility criterion. All I would say for the purpose of this slide is that this is, as the lawyer, I would say that this is non-negotiable. So if you are putting together a consortium and a proposal for this single stage call, you must, and this is the collective responsibility of the consortium, you must ensure that your consortium is able to bring this 45%. But again, we recommend 50%. If it's not, we have it there in the big red box. If it's not secured selectively by the private members and or contributing partners, the proposal will be declared ineligible and therefore will not be evaluated. So this is a gate that basically you have to pass through. So Gail will give more information on this in the financial webinar. But just it's important that we identify for everyone now in this webinar that this is extremely important. And as we basically said, this is just an additional slide to remind us that while it's 45%, it actually should be 50%. We recommend the extra 5% just to make sure, because changes can occur during project implementation, etc. And then we have the slide here and an actual link which you will find useful for the financial aspect, which is on the 12th of January in the afternoon, and that's Gail's webinar that I've actually been referring to. All right, and then so we're going to talk about intellectual property for a couple of slides. Now, this is particularly relevant because, as some of you will know, we actually had some of the specific call topic webinars yesterday, and a couple of questions on IP came up. So hopefully in these 2 or 3 slides, I'm going to be able to address enough of the IP regime to kind of reassure the people who are in the current call, make sure it's totally consistent with what we discussed yesterday in I think it was called topics 1 and 2 yesterday, and make sure that you guys are confident enough in relation to the rules that you feel you can bring your intellectual property and not have too many concerns in that regard. So the first slide here is literally just a snapshot that we do, and it's very, very simple. And we essentially identify the main elements of the IP rules. So on the left-hand side, we have what we call the background identification. So background, and we have this here underneath in bold, background is defined as any data, know-how, or information, whatever its form or nature, that is held by the beneficiaries before they acceded to the agreement and needed to implement. So before the actual grant agreement starts, and usually during the proposal stage, but it can be developed further later on, usually the participants in the project have a good idea of the kind of background that's actually required to run the project, the assets that are going to be needed. Now, this background will then be discussed between the actual participants and identified and then written down in the actual consortium agreement. It's normally in one of the annexes where all the background that everybody's bringing is listed. And this is quite clear. And then if you move to the right-hand box, this is sort of a timeline. We have start and end. So basically what happens is you bring in the background at the start of the project. It's used throughout the project. As you can see in the brown box at the top, if you're submitting background to the project and it's agreed that you're bringing this in, then you're granting access rights to everyone so that they can use that background to get their own stuff done in the actual projects, and possibly wider use as well. Then using the background, the project participants will actually generate results. Results, as you can see, is our second definition halfway down. It's any tangible or intangible effect of the action, data, know-how, or information. Now, this is important, and we got a specific question on this yesterday. So let me just reiterate for the purposes of this. If you generate results in an IHI project, you are the owner of those results. This is indisputable. Now, there's 2 caveats here that I raised yesterday, and there's 2 caveats here that I would repeat. First things first, you are indeed the owner of the actual results, but you must grant access rights to the other beneficiaries in the project to those results. So 1, they can get their own stuff done in the actual project, and 2, potentially that they can conduct research use in relation to those results. That is not, and I would say that research use, that's not commercial exploitation. This will be discussed in every consortium, I'm sure, during formation and then during what we call the negotiation phase. You can bring your background and generate results in IHI projects with complete confidence, but you need to discuss these assets and these issues with your other consortium partners. And then in relation to, just like background, you'll be granting access rights to those results. And then in terms of when I talk about access rights, really what we just talk about is who and when can someone use the background and results in the actual project. Just some key points here that we've identified just to flag. This list here is a mix of, it's for those people who know the previous program, IMI 2, and know some of the intellectual property rules there, but it's also some really, really key points that we have in IHI that we really need to draw attention to. So the first one will be apparent to the lawyers in the room. Horizon, whereas under IMI 2, we had our own specific derogation, we had our own specific legal basis, and we had our own specific grant agreement. We had an IMI 2 dedicated grant agreement. Here for Horizon Europe, we use the Horizon Europe grant agreement. There's no specific derogation, so the Horizon Europe intellectual property rules apply directly to IHI grant agreements. And then moving to the second bullet point, then indeed, because we use the Horizon Europe grant agreement, then it's exactly the same. You use Article 16 from the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement. That's supplemented by the further rules, which you find in Annex 5 of exactly the same agreement right at the end. And then it's modified by any applicable call conditions that IHI actually inserts. So in relation to the annex, again, for the lawyers in the room, I would refer you to Article 16, then Annex 5. Annex 5 has a couple of subsections. First, it's the section for the JUs generally, for the joint undertakings generally, but then there's also an IHI specific section within the JU specific section. So just make sure that you have all the relevant parts. Unlike IMI, there's a couple of points here that we're going to draw your attention to. Plevius has already mentioned one, which is the affordable access provisions. So this is something which is imposed on those call topics which have specific conditions. It's going to apply for the majority, if not all, of the call 7 topics. This is something that will have to be considered by the consortium right from the very start. And we'd refer you really here to the IHI guide for applicants, where we talk about this affordable access provisions and what's required and what's needed in quite a bit of detail, and also to the website. Just before that, we're also talking about the right to object to transfers of ownership or exclusive licenses. IHI does, at all times, for every single IHI grant agreement, maintain the right to object to the transfer of results or the exclusive licensing if it is the intention of the generator of those results to transfer or exclusively license those results to a third party outside the EU. And this is something which is imposed by our legal basis, and it's something which is closely related to the standard right that the European Commission maintains in the Horizon Europe Grant Agreement. What I would say is this is not something to panic about. It's something that IHI we've discussed internally extensively. We have mechanisms in place. If you have concerns, I would say first reach out to the legal team at IHI, and B, talk to your other consortium members if you have concerns. But I'm confident that this is something which has to be considered, but it should not be a deal breaker for potential applicants. Last couple of points. One, unlike IMI 2, and this is something that we find very useful, and I think is going to be very useful for all participants going forward, at the end of the project, what we call an ROL will be submitted, whereby every single result, which you'll recall from my previous slide is the outputs of the actual project, the list is going to be prepared at the end of the project and submitted as part of the final report, which identifies each and every result and who owns them, and that makes it clear for everyone exactly who's done what, and that includes joint ownership structures. And then lastly, Horizon Europe, and by extension IHI, we have this emphasis on exploitation open science. So we integrate the open science dissemination model, and we project, if on the likely result, I don't think this is very likely in IHI projects, but it's theoretically possible. If there are unexploited project results, those can be matched. If someone doesn't want them, they can be matched with interested parties via the Horizon Results platform. And then we have just one point there in red, which we talk about time after time, but I'll reiterate it here. These IPR rules, because most participants in IHI, they're really bringing valuable assets. The specificities of the IPR, starting from background and who's bringing what and what they're contributing, right through to the access rights, the terms under which the access rights can be granted, and how long they should exist for, and what they're being exercised for. This should be detailed in the actual consortium agreement, and we'll talk about it in a future slide in relation to the options in relation to the consortium agreement. Over to Plevius for call to grant award.
Thank you, Desmond, for reminding us all the rules. It's quite a lot, to be honest, and I'm sure we might have questions from applicants about the eligibility to participate, the funding, the IP, but I'm confident that the legal team will be fully available to reply to any question. Please, of course, in the chat box, you can make the questions, but also after the webinar, you can send your questions to the info desk or applicants' functional mailbox, and the addresses will be available in the slides. Now we'll go to a little bit more softer, I would say, topic. I will give you some information from the call to the grant award. So the coordinator, as soon as create its proposal in the funding and tenders portal, will be able to download the full proposal template package. And what is this package for the IHI joint undertaking? Of course, applicable to the whole Horizon Europe program is a proposal template part A. This is it is generated by the IT tool, includes information on the proposal, the detail of the participants, the budget, information, the ethics and security, and also information on the clinical studies. The proposal template part B is a narrative part and is uploaded in the system by the coordinator. Now, we have some specific IHI annexes. This is applicable for us, and you might not see them in other Horizon Europe program, but you really need to pay special attention while preparing these annexes. The first one is the type of participant. This annex, even though is not assessed by the external evaluators, is really important for our office to keep track of the type of participants for our KPIs tracks and also for our reporting purposes. So this one, please, for the coordinator to carefully fill it in. Then we have the annex on the declaration of the in-kind contribution commitment. The coordinator should declare and sign on behalf of the consortium the commitment that the 45%, minimum 45% of the eligibility criteria in terms of the in-kind will be kept from the consortium side. So this declaration is also really essential to be part of the proposal package. Then we have the annex of the in-kind contribution to additional activities. This is an optional annex. The system will not be required for you to upload if your proposal doesn't envisage to have in-kind contribution to additional activities. For the proposals relevant to the clinical studies, there is a specific annex, and this is compulsory. It's also part of the proposal package, and this will be required for you to fill it in. There is also additional annex on ethics. This is optional. Of course, the ethics, as I mentioned in the first bullet point, is part, all the information is part in the part A of the proposal. However, in case you want to provide more information that goes beyond the ethics assessment in the part A, this is the place for you to put more information for the ethics experts to assess your ethics requirement. And of course, the annex of the budget of the full proposal. In part A, you have the proposal budget. There, the IHI specificities are not captured. The coordinator will be requested to have fill in an Excel table, which is the budget of the proposals, capturing also the IHI specificities. The webinar that is taking place tomorrow, the financial webinar, you will have information on a step-by-step process of how to fill this specific annex, because there you will help us, the IHI office, to determine the 45% eligibility criterion. We cannot make any assumption, unfortunately. All the information you will give us in terms of the budget figure, you will help us to determine the 45%, therefore you will be eligible, and then we can proceed to the evaluation. If your proposal is eligible, then you're moving to the evaluation phase. Each proposal is assessed by the minimum of 3 independent experts. In IHI, due to the complexity of the call, the size of the budget, the technical nature of the topics, and also the cross-sectorial consideration, in principle, we'll have more than 3 experts. We're usually targeting a panel of 6 to 7 independent experts in order to have a full assessment, taking into consideration all the aspects I mentioned, so to have a complete picture of how this proposal might deliver in the future. So the proposal is evaluated as it is. The experts cannot make any assumption, so you have to provide all the information in accordance with the proposal template for the expert to assess as precisely as possible. The proposal template has a lot of information that can help you to build the narrative part, the part B of the proposal in terms of the excellence, impact, and implementation. The guide for applicants also provides you a lot of information on how to capture this, and your proposal will be assessed for each criteria, which is the excellence, impact, and implementation. The criteria is scored from 0 to 5, and you can see here that the threshold for each criterion is 3. However, the total should be 10 of the sum of the 3 criteria. Even if you take the minimum, meaning 3 out of 5 for each criterion, you will fail on the overall threshold because the overall threshold should be 10. The selected proposals, the ones that will be funded by IHI, they will go through the grant agreement preparation process, and hopefully they will sign the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement that includes 44 articles and, of course, the specific annexes. IHI follows the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement. However, our specificities are reflected in Annex 5. This is an online process. We sign, the office signs the grant agreement with the coordinator, but the beneficiaries will sign the accession forms. Of course, IHI, in principle, will not sign any grant agreement unless we have a confirmation from the coordinator that you, the consortium, sign the consortium agreement first. This is a contractual arrangement between the participants that you set your rights and obligations, especially the governance, the availability, and the IP. We are not part of the signature or part of the process. You should just comply with the Horizon Model Grant Agreement. Your consortium agreement cannot contradict any articles of the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement. And of course, you can find in IHI website some templates provided by our private members, but also you have the European Commission ones, which is the development of a simplified consortium agreement, but you have the links in the website so you can have a look and have some inspiration. Now, it's very important for the timelines because for this call, now you can start preparing your proposal because by the 16th of January, in principle, hopefully everything goes well in terms of the IT environment. The call will be live in our website, but also in the fundings and tenders portal. Then you have 3 months to submit your application. The call submission deadline is 22nd of May. Sorry, it's not 3 months, 5 months. 5 months, apologies. I'm confused with the 2-stage call. So for the single stage is 5 months, the call submission deadline. Directly afterwards, the office goes to the eligibility and admissibility phase, and directly in June, we'll go through the evaluation. In principle, by the end of July, you should expect the results of the evaluation, and the selected proposals are expected to sign the grant agreements by end of November 2024. Before closing our webinar, and we'll be ready for questions, some points to remember while preparing your application. Importantly, read the call relevant material that you can find in our website in the call dedicated area. Don't think that 5 months, it's a lot of time. You should begin forming your consortium. By forming the consortium, importantly, you have to read the topic text carefully. You really need to understand the expertise required, how to attract the full healthcare value chain in order to be able to address the objective of the topic text. The cross-sectorial aspect and the public-private partnership aspect is very essential for this joint undertaking. This is our difference between IHI and the rest of the Horizon Europe program. Of course, for the single stage, the proposal page limit is 50 pages. If you try to include more pages than the 50, the system will not allow you. The experts evaluators will be instructed to read until the 50th page. Please, at the same time, respect the proposal structure and template, and at the same time, pay attention on how to complete your ethics self-assessment. All these years, when we're making this webinar for IHI, for IMI, we always say, write like an evaluator and at the same time think like an evaluator. How the evaluators will read your proposal. Give them the information directly to the point. The experts are very well trained to really capture from the beginning the objective of your proposal. It's a matter, though, to give them the information ready. Do not complicate things. Make it more straightforward because the experts cannot assume. They assess of what they see. Of course, the 45% eligibility criterion, it's there and it will remain there. Proposals that cannot reach 45%, and we can see that, like I mentioned, in the budget table of the annex that you will submit to us, they will not go through the evaluation. 45% is the minimum. We advise you to keep maximum to the 50%, even more, of course. Why 50? Things are changing. Even though, imagine that you're granted, that the consortium goes through the project implementation. In certain cases, you might have changes. So this 5% extra can really save you to the unfortunate situation that you might need to find additional in kind in order to keep the 45%, because be aware, 45% should accompany the project lifetime. So the 45% should be kept until the project end date. For non-EU, once again, is capped to being 20%, and this is also should be respected during the lifetime. And of course, this 20%, if more or less, should not affect the 45% contribution. For the contributing partner, additional element, the contributing partner should, of course, once again demonstrate the strategic relevance. It's not like you have one entity that would like to join and bring money to the project. The contributing partners should show their added value in the project. They should ensure that they contribute to the objectives of the joint undertaking. And of course, this all information can be found in the website. There's a specific webinar for the contributing partners presented by our colleague Carolina, which is in charge of the contributing partner subject. And if you have questions, you can really reach via the infotext or applicant's mailbox for these specific matters. At the same time, please complete accurately the researcher's table for the proposal Part A and ensure a gender balance. For proposals that have equal scores, we have a specific process that is described in the general annexes. And the number of the researchers might impact also your ranking in case of the equal score. At the same time, a self-declaration for the gender equality plan for the concerned entities should be declared in the Part A of the proposal, and this is an eligibility criteria. At the same time, we advise the coordinators, if they're private for-profit entities, to check if they're financially viable. Sometimes the coordinators do a great job during the preparation of the proposal, but when it comes to the grant agreement preparation process, they realize that they are not financially viable, and then we request them to really change. We request the consortium to change a coordinator, and then a new process of discussion starts that takes time. So before taking the coordinator task, please ensure that you are financially viable in order to proceed through the grant agreement preparation process. Regarding the topic text, importantly, you cannot really contact the industry partners. Please contact the IHI office in case you have any questions. Of course, we cannot give you specific advice on the topics related to your proposal or how you would like to address certain aspects of the topic text, but general information are given also during the topic-specific webinar. But if you have any other type of questions, please contact us. Of course, we received many of questions in the applicant mailbox, and I will invite you after the webinar, if you have questions, to reach us. At the same time, here you can find the link of the state's representative group, people that are appointed to IHI. So in case you need to contact your state representative group member, please feel free to do it. And I would like also to take this opportunity to invite you, in case you have a specific expertise that is really relevant to IHI. IHI is always looking for experts evaluators. So if you have this expertise, please fill in the profile in the funding centers portal, and also email us at experts@ihi.europa.eu with your profile number. And you never know, we might collaborate also in the future evaluations, but also in reviews of projects. Thank you for your attention, and Asima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivier and Desmond, for this really detailed presentation. Before we start the question session, we would like to promote all the sessions that we are holding for call 6 and 7 this week and next week. So if you haven't joined already this session, do so if you are interested in any topic. As my colleague said, tomorrow, Gael, our colleague, will hold the financial session. So you still have time to register on the B2Match platform, so feel free to do so. We also have 3 pitching sessions for call 7. They will be held on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of January. So if you would like to pitch for this session, this is how you have to do. So you have to indicate in your profile by tomorrow that you would like to pitch. You need to register also for the pitching session of your interested topic, and you have to create a participant profile and a marketplace. And when once you are selected, then you have to download the slide template and send us your PPT presentation by the 19th of January. So now we can move on for the question session. We did receive quite a lot of them. So I will start with the first one. Is Andrea asking, can you share which percentage of organizations which have applied to become contributing partners have been approved?
Thanks for that question. There's a short and a long answer. The short answer would be no. We can't actually give you a metric and tell you, the exact percentage. What I would say is that each and every application to become a contributing partner, as Polybius mentioned, actually goes to the IHI governing board. And the governing board approach is actually quite straightforward. They basically, they look at the type of applicant, they look at what the applicant is proposing to bring, how they're proposing to contribute both to IHI's strategic, objectives and goals, and the specific topic / project as well. And then we'll review it on that basis. So we would encourage anyone who thinks that they can, once they fit the criteria that we discussed earlier, for example, not being a constituent or affiliated entity of a private member, but who feel that they can contribute something useful to an actual project, who are in a position to bring, either financial or in-kind contributions to that project, we would encourage them very much to make to bring an application. And as we mentioned very, very briefly, the legal team, Carolina, who's the expert, will have a look at it, provide feedback, and then, if it goes forward, the governing board will take, a deep, comprehensive look at how the contributing partner could actually bring something of value to both to the immediate project and the wider IHI objectives.
Thank you, Desmond. So the next question is from Christopher. He's asking, is it possible for an academic site to be both a contributing partner and a beneficiary?
Yeah. Thanks, Christopher, for the question. So this is interesting because we received almost an identical question yesterday as well. And I'll give the same answer, which is, just to answer this question, there's kind of 2 points. Point one is that in terms of the grant agreement that Polybius and I were talking about, beneficiaries and contributing partners can actually be the same thing, in the sense that beneficiary is a type of participant under the grant agreement. So, but to answer your question, for the purposes of answering your question, I think what you're talking about is, can you actually receive funding from IHI? That seems to be the thrust of the question. So what I would say is, yes, because this is what we call a single stage call, you can have what we actually have, a contributing partner who is, as I mentioned in the previous answer, who has been approved by the IHI governing board, who is bringing either financial or in-kind contribution, who's contributing something valuable both to the project and to the wider IHI objectives, but also theoretically could actually, for the purposes of this call, receive IHI funding as well. And basically what would happen is, in the letter that Polybius briefly mentioned, the applicant contributing partner would say, I'm going to be a contributing, or I want to be a contributing partner, I'm applying to be a contributing partner, this is what I'm contemplating bringing, this is the in-kind, or this is the financial contribution, but please note that I also want to apply for funding as well. And then the IHI governing board, when reviewing this application, will take an informed, holistic view of the contribution itself. So yes, it is possible.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Mark, asking, is the UK now within the EU for the purposes of grant evaluation?
Because now we're on call 7, we can confirm, and I mentioned it in the previous slides, the UK is now what we call coming from an associated country. So they are completely, firstly, eligible to participate, but more importantly, and I think for the purposes of the question, they are now completely eligible to receive funding as well. So also their contributions in kind, that kind of thing will be counted as EU as well, but I'm sure there'll be a question on that as well. So this, Mark, the answer to your question is yes, they are now fully within the EU for the purposes of the grant evaluation, because the UK is now officially an associated country associated with the Horizon Europe regulation. Oh, sorry, the next question, I see a question from Lush. Hi, Lush. Yes, so just to confirm what I was basically saying, now for this call, so let me just emphasize this since we're all here. Going forward, for the purposes of call 7, UK-based ECOP, which is, for those who are still learning the terms, which is in kind towards operational costs, UK ECOP is now considered EU ECOP, and will be for the duration of the actual projects.
Thank you, Desmond. So the next one is from Francesco. Is this proposal within Horizon Europe application? If yes, can you apply also if you are still awaiting for a 2-stage call of the past Horizon?
I think this, of course, IHI is operating under Horizon Europe, and participating in also in other program doesn't really disqualify you to participate also to the IHI one. So you can submit as many applications as you want to any program. The point here, if you're selected for funding, you really need to have the operational capacity to perform in all the grants that you're participating. So yes, we are under Horizon Europe, and of course, doesn't disqualify you to participate in IHI, even though you're waiting or participating in other programs like the two-stage calls you mentioned before.
Thank you, Bolivius. The next question is from Louise and Francesco. They have the same question. What is the expected timeline, and what is the deadline to submit the application?
So I think this question might be received before showing the slides on the timelines. Once again, the call will be published next week. In principle, if everything goes well with the IT tools, will be live on the 16th of January, and then you have 5 months to complete your application, and the deadline will be on the 22nd of May. Okay.
Thank you. The next one is from Nisha. I hope I pronounced it well. It's a very long question. Could you please confirm whether the participation of at least one IHI private member who accepts to be the project leader and to coordinate among other industrial partners is necessary to be eligible? Would it be possible to be eligible in case a consortium has only IHI contributing partners who contribute up to 45%?
So thank you for the question. This goes back to our earlier slide. So the answer to this is actually quite straightforward. We don't need in these single stage calls, in call 7, a private member in the actual consortium. However, I think it's clear that the private members, or as you remember, we were talking about their constituent or affiliated entities, those companies that make up the private members. I think they are a valuable source of both in-kind and financial contributions, that help consortia get to meet the 45% eligibility criteria, or the recommended 50% that myself and Polybius have been talking about. So the idea of the single stage calls is that we try to keep it as flexible as possible as to the participation. So we don't mandate that a private member or a part of a private member needs to be in there, but applicant consortia could indeed find it useful. I think that's the most succinct answer we can give.
So just to complement on this question, in principle, in order to cover and address the objectives of the topic, you need to have the full healthcare consortium aspect, the full value chain. In principle, there you really need to have industry partners. The 45% could come from two type of participants, either members or contributing partners. Imagine that you're an organization and you want to go through the 40 to provide in kind for the project. Either you have to be a member or a contributing partner. Without the 45% budget, cannot the proposal fly in terms of the evaluation. And at the same time, yes, we expect, of course, to have industries in the proposals. The cross-sectorial aspect is one of the elements that will be fully assessed by the expert evaluators. You have it also in the proposal templates for you to think how to address it. But also, if you go to the evaluation sub-criteria that can be found in the evaluation forms, you can see once again there the aspect of the public-private partnership. So you really need to see how to address the PPP, the public-private partnership within your proposal.
Thank you, Bolivius. Now the question is from Steve. For affordability, do we have to describe how much the products will cost? What do we have to write?
So I think that to echo what Polybius said, when we talk about this affordable, available, accessible, This is something which is going to grow in detail as the project, if the project gets funded, as the project actually progresses. So at this stage, for the purposes of the proposal, what we want to see is that the consortium understands that 3A is going to be a factor in the project and in the downstream outcomes. So no, we don't need that level of detail at the proposal stage, but we would just flag. We talked about the ECA plan. It's those kind of places, and during the project that you will start looking at pricing strategies, you'll look at downstream effects. That's when you go into that level of detail. So just at the start, literally, I think, something quite short, communicating to the potential observers that you understand that 3A is actually going to apply, and what some of the implications of this are, and that's it. So to answer your question, Steve, no, that level of detail not required. Yeah, just a strategy.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Cheryl. Is the USA eligible for funding since they are eligible for the health cluster?
Yes, thank you. We actually get this question a lot. So if you remember this early slides we basically had where we were talking about the third countries. Unfortunately, the USA is a third country and they are not associated with the Horizon Europe regulation or the EU. Now, I'm also aware of a bilateral funding arrangement for academic institutions, which exists between some parts of the EU, particularly the European Commission, and some parts of the health cluster and us. Unfortunately, IHI is not subject to this, so IHI is not, from the start, able to automatically offer funding to US-based institutions because they're a third country, so we say no. However, I would just remind the querist that potentially, if the US institution is bringing something really exceptional, there is a possibility, if the case is actually made in the actual application, that we could consider on an exceptional basis grant funding, but that should be discussed with the rest of the consortium, and really the US-based institution would have to bring something quite exceptional to the actual project.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Cora. Will Canada be considered as associated?
Whose is it? Cora. So actually, your question is very well timed because the IHI team itself, we spent quite a bit of time on this question yesterday. So the succinct answer we can give you is, for the purposes of going forward now, Canada is associated with what's called Pillar 2 of the Horizon Europe program. IHI is under Pillar 2, therefore, IHI treats Canada as an associated country, and therefore Canada's legal entities are A, welcome to participate, and B, eligible to receive funding from IHI, just as if they were European member states. So that's the good news.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Francisco. Are Swiss partners funded by the Swiss government automatically, like in other Horizon calls?
So I know I mentioned this in the previous slide, and I want to be very careful here on this. So to reiterate what we said, if you're coming from Switzerland, you're absolutely not receiving funding from IHI, unless by a very, very small chance you were granted exceptional funding, but I don't think we do that because of what I'm just about to say, which is, as we understand it, the Swiss government has quite an advanced scheme to allow funding for those legal entities coming from Switzerland to essentially participate at their own cost because the Swiss government supplies the funding. However, IHI A doesn't offer a guarantee that they're going to be able to avail of this, and B, we don't give you any information in relation to it. So if you are coming from Switzerland and you want to participate, I would urge you to reach out to the Swiss government, to look at the information they have on the website. We have anecdotal information, and I referenced this earlier on, that the system is quite good and it's quite advanced, and it seems that most of the applicants receive their funding without a problem. But this is very much on the Swiss applicant themselves, and we can't give any kind of guarantees or recommendations in relation to that. Just look into it as early as possible to avoid disappointment or surprises.
Thank you, Desmond. The next question is from Andreas. It's also like the same question as the one before. Is Australia associated, and can A, academic partners, and B, SME from Australia participate?
So New Zealand is associated. Australia is Australia is recently associated as well. Sorry.
New Zealand.
New Zealand is.
Australia not.
is not. Sorry. So unfortunately for the Australians, they're again very welcome to participate. We love to have them. However, because the association agreement has not been signed, unlike New Zealand, who've literally just joined, they won't be eligible to automatically receive funding from IHI.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Selkan. Will IHI private members participating in the consortium contribute to 45%, or participating IHI partners and contributing partners have to be different?
I think this goes to Polybius's point. He went into quite a lot of detail. So
Yep.
The private members. So to answer to go to Polybius's point, which we had, I think the private members, they bring something. Okay, we muted. Now? Yes. Yeah. All right. Sorry, we were having some sound issues there for a second. So I think Polybius really covered this very well when he kind of added to the answer I'd given earlier. I think that the private members, they basically they can contribute if they're included in an applicant consortium. I think they can bring the in-kind or financial contributions, which are essential towards hitting the 45% minimum 45% eligibility criteria, or 50%. And as Polybius also mentioned, they do sometimes bring that cross-sectoriality, which is essential as well. So I think that the short answer to the question is yes. I think they can basically contribute. And then in relation to how they can interact with the project, because it's a single stage call, they can both contribute the in-kind and the financial contributions, but potentially, if they wish to, they could also receive funding as well.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Steve. Is it also fine if all partners in the consortium contribute in kind?
Well, the simple answer is
I can take this one. So very short. It's not expected that all the consortium partners to provide in-kind contribution, because like we said, the 45% counts only from the private members and contributing partners. For example, imagine that you are an SME, you want to provide money to the project. If you are not a member or a contributing partner, this money cannot count against the 45%. You have to have you have to be baptized, let's say, either a private member or a contributing partner in order for your contribution to count on the 45%. Otherwise, then you can request funding, and this will be count on the IHI funding.
Thank you, Polybius. Steve is also asking how can you contact private members?
Here we're referring now to the single stage, because there is a difference between two-stage calls and single-stage calls about contacting, how to find, for example, or contacting members of the joint undertaking. For example, just to cover quickly, very quickly, the two-stage call, because there in the two-stage calls, the pre-identified industry consortium is included in the topic text, and the applicants are prohibited to contact these specific private members. But this can cover it to the webinar of the two-stage call next week. For the single stage, you should take advantage of the IHI brokerage events, the info days, and also to start interacting with the applicant, with the industry members and the associations. You can also check the website of our private members, the FPA, COSIR, Europa Bio, Medtech Europe. You can find a lot of information on their website on how, for example, you can establish some contact. Of course, you can use the IHI platform for the call days. There, we include a networking module that you can find partners to your consortium. You can message them directly because you will be asked to create your profile, what expertise you can give to a consortium, what you're interested in, which topic, for example, you're interested in. And at the same time, we encourage you to create, of course, your profile in the marketplace. Of course, the IHI Call Days is not the only avenue that you can really follow. So you have to really explore other possibilities through your networks, through any other type of events that you participate to really establish context for creating or be part of a consortium.
Thank you, Bolivius. The next question is from Pamela, asking what is the EC reimbursement for the academia and hospital?
It's 100%. The rate is 100%. So for the single stage call, it's 100% funding rate.
Thank you. Alessandro is asking, it's unclear for him, apparently, if intergovernmental organizations in Switzerland are eligible for funding.
Okay, sorry, again, we're having some sound issues. In these meetings, the lawyers always seem to get muted. I'm sure it's a coincidence. No. Thank you, Alessandro. This is a good question. So to just reiterate, let me reiterate what we said on the previous slides. So what we basically said on the previous slides was independent legal entities coming from Switzerland, because Switzerland is a third country, are not eligible for funding. This is completely true and completely clear. Now, however, reading your question, when you talk about intergovernmental organizations, then I think the question is, are these basically organizations which might be composed of actual member states? If they're member states, or what we would classify as European interest organizations, and I think if we're talking about Switzerland, the one that really comes to mind, for example, is CERN, then that's different, because the Horizon Europe regulation, the legal basis basically states that such European interest organizations are eligible for funding and IHI can fund them. So IHI can fund CERN. So what I would say is, if you're unsure, just find out exactly what the status of your organization is. Is it, for example, composed of member states, or even if you're from CERN, that's even better. And then that will determine whether, even if you're based in Switzerland, what the funding is. But if you're an independent legal entity coming from Switzerland, then we cannot fund you. I hope that's clarified you somewhat.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Gianluca, asking, are proprietary software licenses authorized for in-kind contribution?
So this ties in slightly with what I was talking about one of the slides when I was talking about the grant agreement and Article 6. The key point here is that for in-kind, how we define in-kind in IHI, in-kind contributions, is it is an incurred cost by the person who's actually making the contribution. So for us, what we do is we basically look at, is the thing that's actually being contributed really a cost? And then we basically have some examples here. You know, does it appear as a line item in the annual accounts of the actual participant who's making the contribution? So for me, for proprietary software licenses, the problem that we've experienced in practical operations in IHI, and indeed in IMI2 before us, is that usually proprietary software licenses, they don't constitute an incurred cost by the software holder itself. Usually what happens is whoever's developed the software just basically authorizes other beneficiaries to use their software. That doesn't involve any cost whatsoever. So it's hard for us to classify such licenses as actual costs and therefore in kind. Now, I will draw a distinction between the license being a cost and things like curation or maintenance or support that could potentially be seen as a cost. So, but on the basis of the question that's being asked, on the information that you're providing, I would say at first glance, no, a proprietary software license wouldn't be considered as in kind because it wouldn't meet the criteria of a valid cost which has been incurred by the person who's providing and which doesn't appear as a line item on their annual accounts. Now, if it turns out that the factual situation is different, then we could revise the legal finding, but that would be the opening position because that reflects what we normally encounter in IHI.
Thank you. The next one is from Steve asking, can you contribute hardware in kind?
So, I mean, again, it really depends how we define hardware, but if we use the same guidelines as we just used for Gianluca, if this is something which is being supplied to the actual, being supplied to be used by the actual consortium in the actual project, and it's an incurred cost, it's possible that this actually could contribute as in kind, if, for instance, making equipment available or something. So what I would say is, if in doubt, contact the legal team here at IHI, use the info desk or the applicant's functional mailbox. Just give us the details and we can do a quick analysis for you. But it's, yes, I think that's something that seems to be more likely. But again, we would have to be sure that this is indeed a cost which is being incurred by the participant.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Luis Correa. Could you provide an example on how do contribution work?
If I understand well, it means you refer to the type of contribution while building your proposal. So like we Desmond presented earlier, you have three types of contributions: in kind, financial contributions, and in kind contribution to additional activities. But at the same time, on the opposite side, you have the IHI funding. While you're building your proposal, you have the different type of partners from academia, SMEs, private members, and or contributing partners. You prepare your work packages, you prepare your tasks. In principle, the tasks are associated to budget. Tasks related to a hospital or research organization or to university that they receive funding from IHI, they will really explain what these tasks will be about. At the same time, private members, they will explain how the task will contribute also to the specific objectives of the work packages and at the same time to a contributing partners. Then you have your budget table. In the budget table, following the Horizon Europe one, you have the total, you have the contributions, including the IHI funding. At the same time, in the specific annex, the budget, you have the information of the three types of contributions I explained before: the ICOP, the financial contributions, and the in-kind contribution to additional activities. Like we said, we'll not go in details. This is not the purpose of this webinar. The webinar of the financial aspects is tomorrow, and you still have time to register to join us tomorrow.
Thank you, Bolivius. The next one is from Luis. It stated that results cannot be transferred to third parties outside the EU. Is it allowed to transfer the EEA countries, for example, Norway?
Thanks, Luis. Okay, so, well, let me just provide one clarification then and go from there. So what we stated in the previous slide, we didn't say that results cannot be transferred outside the EU. What we said was that IHI joint undertaking maintains the right to object to transfer of results outside the EU, or to exclusive licensing outside of the EU. And that's a slight distinction. So what it essentially means is if someone wants to transfer a result which they've generated outside the EU, they notify the IHI, and then based on a set of criteria which relates to the strategic objectives of the EU and to sensitive technology areas like cyber or AI or green tech, we may elect to object to that transfer, and that's very different from a blanket prohibition. So it's still contemplated that results can be transferred to an extra EU jurisdiction. That's fine. And then the second point is to answer your question then on the basis of the answer I've just given, because Norway is an associated country, they're considered as part of the wider EU area, therefore it's not a problem. And therefore, if you wish to transfer results which you have generated in the IHI project to Norway, it's not going to, IHI isn't concerned because it's considered part of the EU for the purposes of this exercise.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Dalia. If results are generated by the non-EU partners, will they retain ownership and are able to exploit them?
We're really getting a lot of intellectual property questions today. So again, I just would clarify one thing, which is if so. To go back to what I said in the very first IP slide, whatever you generate in the IHI project remains yours. So you retain ownership of it. And of course, that is subject to the caveats that we actually discussed in relation to the access rights and also the IHI right to object if you want to transfer stuff outside the EU. Now, but I think what's also useful to mention in relation to this question is that if you're coming to an IHI project and you were anticipating generating a lot of results or generating useful results, in terms of how the grant agreement actually works, and this would extend to if you're bringing in a lot of background as well. You'll remember in a previous slide I said that there are different types of participants in a grant agreement. We can have beneficiaries, we can have associated partners. What I would suggest is, if you're coming from a non-EU jurisdiction, we should endeavor to bring you in as a beneficiary one way or another, because these things in relation to generating results, normally it's the beneficiaries that generate the results. It's normally the beneficiaries that bring the background, and it's easier to handle the access rights. So the short answer to your question is they will retain ownership because they generated it, but it will be much easier to handle the IP issues if you are beneficiaries in the project itself. And now we can draw a helpful contrast between, if you're coming from the UK now, it's very easy to be a beneficiary in an IHI project. It's very easy to take that role. Whereas if you're from the US or Australia, that's going to be a bit more difficult, and we may need to discuss that with the legal team and yourselves to find out the best way to kind of structure this. But in principle, I think the short answer is yes, you can retain ownership.
Thank you, Desmond. One question from Cheryl asking if there will there be other pitching sessions. So you have to know that we have 3 pitching sessions planned on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of January for the 3 topics of Call 7. So those are the only pitching session that we will have. So don't forget to visit our IHI website to have the details of the agenda, and also the B2Match platform to register either to attend or either to pitch. We have another question from Steve. What do you mean with open science? How is this working with data from patients? Sorry.
So open science is, I think we could best describe it as, it's in the IHI grant agreement, and in the grant agreement it reflects a philosophy which is now very strongly embedded in Horizon Europe, and the open science approach you will see scattered everywhere in the Horizon Europe documentation. So Horizon Europe embraces what are called recommended and mandatory practices. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail here because it's quite large, and I think what I would recommend is you do a quick search on it. But it goes everything from in relation to ensuring that there's open access for scientific peer-reviewed publications, for example, management of the research data, which should utilize verification principles. All the way through to the recommended practices like early and open sharing of research management, open access to the research outputs, which, as we said, are the project results. So I think we can easily disappear down a rabbit hole here. Steve, what I would recommend is do a quick search on the European Commission pages. The information is there, but just bear in mind that this philosophy and those recommended practices are also dealt with in the grant agreement. So if indeed you're in a project and this is a concern, take a look at the dissemination section of the Horizon Europe grant agreement. The information is there, and then if you have any further questions, just follow us up with the legal team, and we can organize an email exchange or a call or whatever. But I think the best thing I can say is verification, open access to publications, open access to research as much as possible if it doesn't infringe on obviously proprietary concerns, and getting the information out there as quickly as possible, and obviously measures to, for instance, ensure reproducibility and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is from Victoria. Will only one project or more projects be funded under Call 7 topic 123? In other words, should a proposal aim at the whole budget available, or will the whole budget be allocated to more projects?
So the indicative contribution in the topic is included in the topic description. So there is a range of funding that IHI is expecting from the proposals to cover the specific objectives of the topic. So if you request more than the indicative one, then you have to justify why. So in principle, for each topic, we're expecting for the Call 7, if I remember well, we're expecting 2 proposals to be funded per topic. Importantly, is not just asking for the funding, you really need to justify according to the objectives of the topic text. So even if you request less, it doesn't mean that you're making a favor, let's say, to IHI by requesting less funding. The important thing here is to address the objective of the call. Yes, I think this is done. Then we can move to the next one, which is what is the funding rate for the early stage startup, from Daniel. Here, once again, it's 100% funding rate. And of course, if you're early stage startup, you really need to ensure that you have the operational capacity to do the work in the project. And this is also part of the assessment of the evaluators during the evaluation phase. For the next one, from Gabriela Paleru, can an expert evaluator be part of a proposal at the same time and recuse himself in case they are appointed to evaluate its own organization? Of course not. Here we're talking about a direct conflict of interest. If you are part of an organization that at the end is participating in a proposal as a part of the consortium, of course, you will not be able to be part of the evaluation panel for this specific topic. In case, for example, you have expertise that can be assigned to another topic, this can be discussed, but this should be assessed on a case-by-case basis, and also to really assess the conflict of interest situation. From Antoine, is the participation of at least one IHI private member in the consortium a prerequisite to be eligible? in order to be eligible, once again, you need 45%. From where the 45% comes? From private members and or contributing partners. Then you can ask, can we have the possibility that the 45% can be provided only by contributing partner? I would say yes, there is this possibility to happen. One contributing partner or several can really reach and help to reach the 45%. However, where is the industry? Where is the public-private partnership? Where is the cross-sectoriality aspect that this is the main characteristic of the IHI joint undertaking? Of course, this is not an eligibility criterion. The eligibility criterion is the 45%. You can reach your 45% through the contributing partners, but these contributing partners, of course, should be financially viable to provide the 45%. For example, I can see a question before, a startup company can contribute to a project. Of course, can contribute to a project, but the startup company can provide the 45%. Is it financially viable to go through and commit of millions of euros to the IHI? This is up to the governing board to assess. But in principle, we're expecting these contributing partners to be operational and financially viable to really provide to the project. And we're expecting to see also the members of the joint undertaking part of the consortium, or at least the industry contribution. The next one, if you have an investment-only private partner willing to join your consortium, what will be the possible formal challenges? So, imagine that you have only one private member. This is, if I understand well the question, I'll say to my colleagues. So you have only one private member that contributes to the 45%. So taking all of in this entity, the 45%. Then I would say the challenge here is mostly on the scientific aspect. And maybe you're, I'm repeating myself all the time about the cross-sectoriality, about the industry contribution, about the PPP. If the topic can really, the objectives of the core topic can be addressed by only one industry member, and the cross-sectoriality aspect is satisfied, and then the healthcare value chain is really covered, I would say yes. But then it's up to the experts to assess. So in principle, yes, but in our case, I have the feeling that in our topics, we expect something more.
Thank you, Bolivius. The next question is from Christian. Is the page limit of 50 pages restricted to part B or for both A and B?
So the 50 pages is only for the part B. The part A is generated automatically, and these are online forms, so this is not taking into consideration for the page limit of the part B. And of course, on top are the specific annexes that are not taking into consideration of the page limit of 50 pages. And a piece of advice here, some of the applicants regarding the ethics are covering these aspects, the additional ethics aspects in the part B, so they are taking part of their 50 pages. In IHI, we would like to give you more space to elaborate for these 50 pages. That's why any additional issues, aspects, points you would like to cover on the ethics, you have now the freestyle additional annex on the ethics that can be that is optional and can be uploaded in the submission tool.
Thank you. Antoine is writing us a really long question. So in the IHI consortium agreement template, the project leader defines the industrial beneficiary which is in charge of the overall scientific and project leadership. Do we need to identify such an industrial project leader in single stage calls, or is it only for two-stage calls? This is the first question. The second one, does the project leader need to be an IHI private member? On the contrary, in the consortium agreement template, the coordinator seems to have a role reduced to grant management. Does it mean that academic institutions cannot act as scientific project leaders in IHI actions?
Thanks, Antoine. Okay, so indeed, as Nassima said, that's quite an involved question. But let me provide one clarification first, and I think then that might inform everything else. So when you talk about the IHI consortium agreement, I presume you're talking about the consortium agreement which has been produced by the private members for use in IHI actions. So I'll just make that important distinction, and Plivius referenced this earlier on, because that consortium agreement has not actually been prepared by the IHI team, but we're happy that it works fine for IHI actions. So indeed, as you say, that specific consortium agreement in its default configuration envisions more of what we would consider a two-stage call, where you basically have a predefined industry consortium and then you basically have the applicant consortium as well. And what happens, as is contemplated in the two-stage topic text, it's envisioned that one of the private members or one of their constituent or affiliated entities may take a leadership role in this project leadership role, which does the science. But as Plivius said, and as I think I briefly mentioned as well, when it comes to the consortium agreement, you can have whichever configuration you, the consortium, like, so long as there is nothing in there which conflicts with the terms of the actual grant agreement. So you can have what may be considered a more traditional model, where basically the coordinator of the consortium assumes both, let's call it the financial and administrative functions, but also takes science functions as well. It is completely at the discretion of the applicant consortium how they organize themselves, because if you've studied the consortium agreement in that much detail, you will also have noticed that IHI does not sign the consortium agreement. It's only signed by the participants themselves. Therefore, you have a great deal of flexibility. The only thing we will be concerned about is 2 points. One, that there's nothing in there which contravenes or conflicts with the terms of the grant agreement everyone is going to sign, and which IHI is going to sign. And two, that as Plivius mentioned, that the consortium agreement is fully agreed and is in the process of being signed before a signature of the grant agreement. So you have a lot of flexibility in relation to how you structure your consortium, as long as you stay within the rules. So if you want to basically combine coordinator and project leader and just call it coordinator, that's totally fine. But just make sure that this is properly reflected in the legal terminology in the consortium agreement itself.
Thank you, Desmond. The last question is from Hans. Would TRL 5 be the right level for a Call 7 project?
So the long story short here is that the technology readiness level do not apply currently to the IHI calls. IHI calls are operating through the, I mean, it's a research and innovation actions in the pre-competitive area. So the TRL 5 here, we're talking mostly about a technology validated in a relevant environment, so which is not really applicable for IHI calls. And I think this is also mentioned in the guide for applicants. So the TRLs are not for IHI. So it's not really necessary to show the technology readiness level and the upscale in terms of the technologies, etc. So, and this is, if you follow the proposal template, is also very clear there.
Thank you, Olivius. So before closing this webinar, and I would like to thank you for all the questions that you addressed to us, I would like to explain really quickly how to use the marketplace to be able to find partnership and create a consortia. So in the B2Match platform, you have to navigate to the platform first, go to the marketplace, choose the project cooperation. Of course, choose the topic that you are interested in. And then you can browse on the right side on the partners that you are interested in. You can send them messages and book meetings with them. Also, how to book meetings in the platform, it's 4 easy steps. First, you have to make yourself available. Then you look for partners on the participant tab. You select a date, a time. You can have up to 8 attendees per meeting, and you can send a message to the person that you would like to have a meeting with. We will close our webinar here as we are really running out of time. Thank you all. Thank you, Bolivius and Desmond, for your presentation, really detailed. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good luck for your proposal. Thank you.